Okay, well, let's start this show. It's 12:01. For all the people who are on time, we're not going to keep you waiting. For all the people who are going to be late, this is recorded and we're going to share it later on social media. So first and foremost, I would like to welcome everyone for our webinar. We're going to act like the big brands today. We have Atomic Robot and Copilot CX joining forces. And our goal at this webinar today is to really provide you with insights that we have gathered over the years, both in terms of app development, app UX, UI, and post-purchase engagement that it will allow you, our audience, to take all of those tools and hopefully convert better and create better engagement for your users. With us today, I'll start with the Atomic Robot team. We have Sam Sontag, who is the Director of Client Solutions. We have Mia Dietrich, who is the Senior Product Designer at Atomic Robot, and John Brady, who is the Senior Android Consultant. On Copilot side, on the host side, we have Tiki Naftali, who is the co-founder and CRO at Copilot. And my name is Moti Elkheim. I'm going to moderate today's webinar, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Copilot. The webinar is going to be divided into two parts. In the first part, Atomic Robot is going to walk us through best practices of app design, app development. Many of the brands that I'm seeing here that are already attending, and we have great attendance today, may already have their app, but there is a lot more that we can do in order to update, stay ahead of the curve when it comes to app experiences. And later on, in the second half of the webinar, Tiki will come in and we'll talk about the post-purchase experience, how you can engage your users and convert them with true continuous engagement to benefit your brand, both in terms of upsells, reviews, onboarding, etc. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Sam. Sam, the stage is yours.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for attending. So Atomic Robot, Modi already explained it a little bit, but we are a mobile app design and development agency. We've partnered with companies big, small, everywhere in between, but part of what we're going to be talking about today is how we take a lot of those considerations on the apps that we're doing at scale and how we can implement that into every single app, and a lot of those key considerations to develop something that can scale, but also has proper interactions across the board. So we have, over the past 4 or 5 years, gained a lot of specialty in IoT devices and mobile apps for that specifically, which is where our partnership with Copilot's been great. And we really see the mobile app as a good hub and jumping off point for a lot of mobile apps. And there's a lot of different interactions that you can utilize with that beyond just connecting via Bluetooth and things like that. And I believe Ziki will be talking a little bit more about where that fits in and what level it does in the future. But I'm excited to kick this over to our team and talk about what they do, what their considerations are on both the engineering and design side to build an app just like the big brands are and have success in the mobile app. So I'll kick it over to John.
Hey everybody, I'm John Brady. I am a senior Android consultant at Atomic Robot. I've been working with Android for a little over 10 years. You can see from the slideshow, there's a list of important parts an app should have to be successful, but there's a few items that the big brands put a higher priority and effort towards when you reach the global market space. These are onboarding, localization, and accessibility, and then the relationship that exists between these items and the dev, designer, and user experience teams. So with onboarding, what comes to mind when you think of onboarding? As a developer, in the back of my mind, I always think this is my one chance to not mess up. I only get one first impression for a majority of users. I don't know how many times as a user, I've opened up an app within the first 3 minutes of me using the app. I was already annoyed or frustrated and just immediately uninstalled it and went down the list looking for a different app for the same solution. When your app is paired with an IoT device, you do get a little more leeway since you've generally purchased a device, and the return process may be tedious enough to sway them from returning and keep going with the app. So what do we need to focus on in onboarding to keep the user happy? It needs to be quick and easy. It needs to be able to understand and follow along. The speed at which you can get the user to the home screen of your app is actually very important. This will obviously vary depending on the IoT device that you're setting up. Some of them may be more complicated and may take more time. But you don't want 6 screens of permissions, 5 more trying to get the user to register and make an account, and then finally setting up the device and app settings, which is another several screens. If you have too much, you may want to split up onboarding. Due to laws and regulations, you have to do permission requests. Generally, when you reach the global space, there's not a way around that. So try and do 1 screen of permissions and then go straight to the home screen. This lets the user explore, and then you can do minor prompts to help them direct to registration or device setup, and it gives them a better experience. And then if you include videos or animations on how to, or a YouTube video with simple playback controls, it's very helpful for onboarding IoT devices. So what's the goal of localizing the app? You want to make the user feel like the app was built for them. You don't want the user to feel like you threw the app through Google Translate and said, that's good enough. Global support for multiple languages is not just translating the app, but making sure that translations are done and everything still fits well on the screen. I don't know how many times I've seen an app translated to Russian or German and the text is just randomly cut off because someone didn't take a look and just open the app once. What's also important is date, time zone, and formats. Any dates, calendars, or times can vary between different regions, which are separate from the language. So you'll need to confirm what that region uses, whether it's a 24-hour clock, year, month, day format, or even if their week starts on Monday instead of Sunday. Another localization miss I've seen is not being aware that there are right to left languages. Generally, the OS itself can mirror your application to display right to left, but the mirror isn't always what you want for some of your images. And then accessibility. Accessibility is not just for impaired users. Accessibility is referring to how easy it is to view and use your app. This is for your main user base, as well as anyone that has trouble with visuals or interacting throughout your app. The goal is to remove frustrations and attract more users to your app over other options. Simple things like how big the clickable area for buttons outside of the button itself, or 2 colors next to each other that don't contrast well. I know on several occasions I've rage tapped buttons because I've missed the button just by a few pixels, and it just frustrates you so much. But these 3 big ideas come together when you're using a dev, designer, and UX relationship. A small feedback loop is important. Being able to receive feedback from the user base and running that through user experience, having the designer help, and then what the developer can do also to accomplish in a small meeting can make a huge impact on the ratings of your app. If one person is actually complaining, you can be sure there's several more who feel the same way but haven't said anything. Helping the user should always be priority 1. Asking why you're making the change to the app. If you don't have any information to support the change or a new feature, then why is it a priority? Without running the idea or problem through a user test or survey, which can help alleviate to having to reiterate the same part of the app several times before coming up with a better solution. So you want to make sure your team is on the same page. Sometimes it may be harder to code, design, or compromise on a solution, but the solution that is focused on the user's experience should carry a lot of weight. And with that, I will kick that off to Mia.
Hi, John, thanks. Yeah, thank you for talking about the development side. Some of my favorite points that John made were not having a ton of screens for your onboarding experience with permissions and all of that. And especially having that small feedback loop between designers and developers. That's super important to me, especially as a designer. So to get started on my portion here, I'll introduce myself. My name's Mia. I'm a senior product designer here at Atomic Robot. I've been working in the IoT space for about 6 years. I led design for an IoT project that got implemented in all of the Krogers in the US, and I have been consulting on IoT design ever since. So hardware is difficult. The IoT space is one of the more difficult industries in which to get the user experience just right, and especially in a timely manner. And this is because in designing for IoT, we need to be cognizant of more than just the software and operating system limitations. We must also design around our hardware limitations, right? And because software can evolve much more quickly than hardware, the onus is often on the designer to improve the holistic experience, from buying the product to unboxing it, installing it, configuring it, and then ultimately enjoying the use of it. So for designers in any industry, we know that in order to evolve the UX of an existing product, we must identify its pain points and iterate on all kinds of solutions. And IoT is no different. One of the most common pain points, as we know, and as John expressed, is onboarding a new device. So here I've mentioned that we must design around software and hardware limitations. But when it comes to onboarding a new device, we also have to design around a user's limitations. Often their limits are in their knowledge of how an IoT product works. So, I mean, our users don't care what goes on behind the scenes. They just care about the device working out of the box, right? So for example, I recently got a new router that did not come with a 2.4 gigahertz band automatically enabled. So I had to set it up for myself for all of my existing IoT devices. And this wasn't intuitive, this wasn't easy. And I was really nervous that I was going to mess up my Wi-Fi for good for everybody in my house. But I had to do this to get my smart devices working again. So in this example, this is where we have hardware limitations butting up against user limitations. So this is where it can be the designer's job to solve this problem, as well as many more problems that will arise with Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and hub-enabled devices. It would have been great if my chosen IoT app had a way to educate me on this 2.4 gigahertz band issue, or had some sort of FAQ or troubleshooting workflow, or even if it referred me to an external source of support. But I was stuck on YouTube and forums for a while instead. So how does this relate to IoT design at scale for larger brands? Well, bigger brands need to think about these sorts of issues at scale. Unexpected limitations pop up all of the time in the IoT space. Users are frequently frustrated by connectivity issues that can be caused by a plethora of sources. It can feel like we're constantly putting out fires, right? And for this reason, a lot more time needs to be devoted to improving and iterating and testing the UX in the IoT space. This means we have less time for fancy UI animations, delightful illustrations, and QAing the implementation, right? To make sure that it's pixel perfect compared to the design. Oftentimes, an IoT company's goals are to go to market with a new product as quickly as possible. And because of this, spending more time on the UX can sometimes be overlooked or even devalued. The answer here on the design side is to increase our speed of iterating on new designs without sacrificing our quality. So how do mature companies do this? How do they make sure that the next release is going to be rock solid on all kinds of phones and tablets while also being compatible with potentially dozens of IoT devices already in the market? How do designers make the best use of their limited roadmaps and timelines? Well, Sam, yes, thank you. The answer is having a robust IoT design system. I'm sure many of you have heard of design systems before. You might be picturing a library of components. For example, here are all of our icons. These are our brand colors. These are our patterns and shadows. And this is what our inputs and dropdowns look like. And this is definitely part of the design system. Don't get me wrong. It's a massive part of the design system. But the whole picture is really so much more. Not only do we want consistent branding and components across our platforms, but we also want consistent behaviors. And don't forget, we're not looking for consistency solely in our UI, but also in how the user experiences our software and our hardware in tandem. For example, if I'm syncing a new light bulb to my Wi-Fi, it may blink to let me know that it's available for syncing. The software also lets me know at the same time to watch out for this. In this case, both the software and the hardware are communicating with me, the user. For cameras and even smart plugs, we can repeat this design behavior by having them blink during syncing as well. This consistency should not be an afterthought. It needs to be baked into the design system itself. A design system for IoT should have precise and easy to read documentation of how the hardware and software communicate with our users. Another important aspect of a design system is how our developers interact with it. We need a full understanding of how our developers read and implement our designs. We need as little friction here as possible. If we stick to a design system with precise and consistent naming conventions, design tokens, styles, behaviors, and components, the less cognitive effort the developers need to spend on understanding and implementing our designs. And this is where the small feedback loop comes into play that John was mentioning earlier. The quicker that designers and developers can interact with each other and the more base understanding they have together, then the quicker and the more consistent things are going to be. So to recap, on what an IoT design system consists of, we can list about 6 things. Obviously, we need a style guide, a component library, some UI patterns, some UX patterns or behavior patterns, consistent language between designers and developers. But the differentiator with an IoT design system is that we also need directives for communication between hardware, software, and our users all in tandem. There are many other tools in a designer's tool belt to accomplish and test this design system, such as user journeys involving the holistic IoT experience, mapping out the information architecture of the applications, A/B testing, all of these things. But all of this takes a lot of time. Having a well-defined and well-maintained design system will relieve the designers and the developers of their design and tech debt, allowing for much faster iterations and testing. This means our products can get on the shelves, our software features can be released, both much faster, and more time means more flexibility to fight those IoT fires as they inevitably come up. And that's what I have for you today concerning IoT design systems. I'll leave it up to Modi here if we have time or not to answer some questions now, or if we want to save it toward the end.
Mia, thank you so much. John, Mia, and Sam, this overview was absolutely remarkable. To our entire audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to plug them in the Q&A button or the chat button at the bottom of your screen, and I'll bring it up to the team at the end of the webinar. Something that is very interesting that we tapped on, both John and Mia, and I don't think that was by coincidence, is the fact that onboarding is critical. Right at the end of the day, you're designing your app, you're launching your product, and everything is funneled into that one very critical moment of onboarding. You want everything to work seamlessly. And the reason that point in time is so critical, there was actually an amazing article published by PwC that says that 20% of American customers and nearly 50% of Latin American customers will abandon a product they love after one single failing point. And that failing point typically happens in the onboarding process. And we always like to say that no UX is perfect and no user is technically sound. They all need a little bit of help to harmonize. And this is a great segue into Tsiki's session about user engagement in the post-purchase phase of the customer interactions. So Mia, John, Sam, thank you so much. We're going to save the questions to the end. And for the audience, again, if you have any questions, feel free to plug them in the chat or the Q&A button below. Tsiki, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Moti. As Mia was talking, I was actually changing the order of my slides because I'm not kidding. I agree that onboarding is one of the most critical parts, especially when you talk about products that people can actually return to the store. So I want to actually start with this. First of all, my name is Tsiki Naftali. I'm the co-founder of Copilot CX. For any of you who doesn't know, Copilot CX helps a brand create post-purchase engagement for connected consumer electronics. So our platform focuses on connected consumer products. Interacting with customers after they bought the product is critical in order to reduce the number of product returns, in order to improve online ratings and improve overall lifetime value. So that's what we do. And one of the things we hear a lot is kind of in hindsight, is that most of the budget was spent on the least used features. And the reason is that we're really excited about cool features like if we have a home security camera, we want to spend most of our resources in optimizing the streaming capabilities or the streaming quality. Sometimes we're building features like a smart user detection or scheduling, etc. But actually, the feature that almost all of your users will experience is the onboarding. So setting your product, which for many companies that we meet used to be kind of a necessary evil that they have to have in the app, is something that many companies do not spend enough resources on. And if you want an analogy, think of a garden that you're building, and you're spending a lot of time and money and resources and sweat on planting those seeds and caring for those plants, but you have a big hole in the pipeline. And obviously it's not one hole, you have probably some other holes in the pipeline down the road. But this onboarding part that is supposed to be the user generator or the water generator for all the beautiful features that you're spending a lot of time and money is something that you should start from. One of the things that we do as a customer signs up for Copilot, we're looking at the number of people or the percentage of people that fail the onboarding and the reason they fail the onboarding. And in many cases, we start there, because if 70% of your customers are succeeding to go through that chasm of onboarding, you have 30% of your users that will never experience those beautiful features, let alone become active ongoing users. So that's, John, that was a really good point. And Mia, I'm happy that you brought this up as well. I want to talk about a definition before I dig deeper into post-purchase engagement. So if you look at all the connected products out there, you can actually put them on a spectrum. On the left-hand side, you see devices that are basically plug and play. So you don't have a digital interface. Think of an old air conditioner or a vacuum cleaner. You plug it in, you click a button, and it just works. On the other edge of the spectrum, you have what we call pure app. Those are physical products that in order to experience the product, you have to use an app or a digital interface. It can be an Alexa app, it can be a mobile app, it can be a web app. So think of a Fitbit with no screen. In order to really get the value out of the Fitbit, I have to launch an app. And obviously you have anything in between. You have products that are more used physically for, by the device. So think of home automation product like a door lock or a shower. And you have products that are app first, meaning I can use both products, but I would mainly go to the app to get the added value from the product. Why do I care about this? I care about this because as you're building your app, designing it, and as you're designing the onboarding process and the entire process that your customers are going to go through, you need to think of whether the app is detrimental or even critical for the experience of the customer, or whether it's kind of a side thing that you need to think of the added value in order to get people to really use the app, because they can use the product even without using the app. Think of a connected toothbrush. If I'm, I can use the smart toothbrush probably forever without using the app. But if I have a unique value that I give the users, and if I'm engaging with the user enough, I can get people kind of closer to dual use. So I'm going to use the toothbrush twice, 3 times a day, but I'm going to launch the app once or twice a week to see my progress and recommendations and so on and so forth. So that's the consumer IoT spectrum. I'm going to share this after the webinar for everybody that wants to find their product on the spectrum. I think this is an important place to start. And I want to move to a question that I get from a lot of our customers. Okay, I went ahead and I built an amazing app and it's added value to my customers, but should I get the customers to download the app? It's nice to have, as long as they buy my product, they don't return it. Why do I care if they download the app and use it or not? And to understand this question, we need to understand the motivation of building a connected product first. Most of the companies were asking, what made you build a connected product? So you've been selling outdoor lights forever, and suddenly a year ago, you decided you're going to do connected outdoor lights. What made you do that? And 85% of the customers that we asked just said, this is to beat or to meet the competition. So the buyer in Walmart said that if we don't have an outdoor lighting with an app, we're not going to have the same shelf space. So that's kind of the motivation of many companies to create an app-enabled product. And to the question, should I get people to download the app? The answer is we need to look at the customer. So this is a customer that bought a regular ceiling fan or a vacuum cleaner. And the value of that customer is the transactional value of what they bought. So if I bought a vacuum cleaner for $99, my value is $99, obviously minus the BOM and any other associated cost with that vacuum cleaner. But if I'm a connected customer and now I have a relationship with the brand can actually interact with me in order to make sure that the setup is really successful, make sure that if I'm happy, I'm reviewing the product online, whether it's on the App Store or Amazon or Walmart or any other store that I purchased the product. That brand can sell me consumable or replenishment, or if I bought a vacuum cleaner, replacement filters, and definitely manage the entire customer experience, as opposed to a customer that just bought the product that I don't even know if they opened the box. So the answer to that question is definitely yes. Going back to the spectrum, it's easier to do that if you're a dual use product or an app first product. It's harder to do that if you're a device first product. But you'll see more and more IoT, consumer IoT products that on the box, as you open the box, or sometimes even before you open the box, you see before you start, download our app. If you have a quick start guide that's printed, you never know where and who got stuck as part of the setup. I think that Mia mentioned 2.4 versus 5 gigahertz. That's a failure that we see with many end users for products that support only 2.4 gigahertz. I would sometimes not know that people got stuck there because they don't have 2.4 gigahertz set up on their router. If I don't have a quick start guide and I lose the manual, and the only thing I have as the user opens the box, the customer opens the box, is please download the app before you continue, and the entire user setup guide is in the app, now I have something critical that I never had before, which is data. I know who got stuck. And it's not just the data, I'm able to actually interact with someone in real time as they're stuck in the setup. And this is critical in order to prevent bad reviews and people returning the product to the store they bought it at. Next thing I want to mention is, and that's something I hear a lot from many of our customers, especially companies that are outsourcing, offshoring the app development, and they're not happy with the product they got, but also with companies that have developers and designers in-house. My app is useless, and this is kind of putting it lightly. Sometimes I hear it much more aggressively. People don't like my app, etc. And the problem I have with that statement is that that statement kind of averages out all the experience that all the users had with that app. And as they say, if you put your feet in ice cold water and your head in a furnace, on average, you feel good. So my app is useless or doesn't work, or people don't like my app, is really generic. And the way to deal with this is not to look at the entire user base and say, on average, my net promoter score is 25, but say, okay, so that's my entire user base, but these people are promoters. They really like my product. They really like my app. They're interacting with it. They're using most of the features. So maybe for those kind of people, first of all, I'm going to try to understand what characterizes them, but I'm also going to send them to Amazon to write a review. And these people are stuck in the onboarding. So I'm definitely not going to send them to Amazon to write a review. So obviously, I'm not going to send an email to all of my customers the same email, but I want to interact with them and help them with the onboarding, or at least offer them support. And I have people that are power users that definitely I want to group those users and find lookalikes on Facebook, or maybe offer them a refer a friend program because they're power users and they might be super promoters. And I have other people, and obviously there might be an overlap between those groups, but people that bought on Amazon, that's another group of users that the campaigns and the interaction with those customers will be a little different than other users. And just to give you one example why this is super, super important, that's an example for a real message that we displayed for customers for one of our customers' products. So users saw happy customers, obviously segmented, saw a message that said, happy with your smart Wi-Fi camera, help us spread the word by leaving a review. And the review now button took them to the store that they bought on. Amazon, if they bought on Amazon, Walmart, if they bought on Walmart, etc. And this was nice. We got a 2.7% conversion rate on this. So 2.7% of the people that saw the message actually went to the store to review. And then we started doing some A/B testing with it, and we said, okay, if we just change the text, the micro copy on the button, instead of review now, we do rate us, it went up a little bit above 3%. And that was cool. So we said, okay, let's keep experimenting and let's put sure with an exclamation mark, and the percentage doubled itself. But look what happened when we actually put the name of the store on the button. So when we put rate us on Amazon, and since we have store attribution, we know who bought on Amazon, Walmart, Best Buy, Mercado Libre, etc. So we put rate us on Amazon, and suddenly it jumped to 11.5%, which is more than 5 times the usual CTR that we used to get on buttons without the name of the store. And this is everything about personalization. So we want to understand as much as we can about our customers' experience, where they bought, how is their onboarding, whether they're delighted or not, are they using great features that we know that are making other customers delighted or not. And then we want to engage with them on a personalized level. That's what we do. And this is the power of having a connected user versus a non-connected user. Thank you. Moti, I'm a little late, but I tried.
Yes, but that was very interesting. And the way I know it's very interesting is that no one dropped out of the session. So we are going over time and everyone is staying. And that's great. Thank you so much for that, Ziki. We do have a couple of questions from the audience, a couple actually for Atomic Robot and a couple for Copilot. Ziki, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind. It says, this question speaks about pain point. From your experience, how do brands interact with their pain points? Do they plan ahead of it, or does it come and then they face it? What do you see as kind of common practices by IoT brands?
What do you mean by pain points? Or
so
that's
the question. So let's say they have that's how the question was written. So let's say I assume they have review issues or an onboarding issues, and then they realize it post-purchase, but they didn't plan for it. So do most brands get ready for those and are planning ahead before launch, or they kind of realize that they have a band-aid and now they need to deal with it in terms of user engagement?
So it's a good question. It depends on the stage of the company with their IoT product. So it can be a company that's selling products for more than 100 years, like Panasonic, but they just dip their toes into the IoT world. Most companies we meet are really reactive as they're getting into the IoT world. So they get a lot of support tickets. They need to hire more support people. There's so-called trauma when switching from non-connected products that are plug and play to connected products, because suddenly I need to think about Apple launching a new version or a new phone, or Motorola launching a new phone with the new Android version. And I need to react to that. The more advanced companies and companies that we work with for a few years are planning more ahead and are more proactive about what they're doing. So going back to onboarding, being proactive about people that are failing the setup, what are they going to see, what experience they're going to have, etc. That's something that really characterizes companies that already kind of had a few cycles with smart products.
Got it. Thank you so much, Ziki. Next one is for the Atomic Robot team. Whoever on the team wants to address it. This one is from Brian. He's asking, I have an app, but it needs updates. How often should I go about updating my app, because I don't want to interrupt my user flow?
John, do you have any thoughts there?
So that's really dependent on a lot of the stuff that your app does. Generally for the App Store, what we see in most IoT devices is if you can hit like smaller updates around the month and a half mark, it gives you enough time to do the stuff, test it, and get it out, as well as because it's smaller, it doesn't impact your users as much. I think the higher end of it is around 3 months. If you go any longer than that, your app starts to get stale. They feel like their reviews are ignored and stuff like that. But generally the 1.5 to 3 month mark seems to be around the right time to get an update frequency.
Got it. Okay, another one for the Atomic Robot team, and then I'll hand the last question to Tsiki. How often does the brand you deal with think about post-purchase versus let's get it to market?
Yeah, I think that's similar to what Ziki had mentioned. There is a lot of reactionary, I think. A lot of brands that come to us, initially, they just want to have on the box that they have an app. And then it isn't until they're already out in that environment that they realize what the potential is. And so that's when they start getting serious and putting some business planning around that. But most of the times, unless they've already launched an IoT app and they already know what the potential is, a lot of times it's just, hey, we need to compete and everybody else has one. Let's be able to put on our box that we have an app. Again, and then once it's already in the world, they realize where the potential actually lies in that post-purchase engagement.
Got it. Okay. Tiki, one last question to you. It says here, you spoke about user segmentation. How do you go about finding those audiences?
That's a great question. So there are two ways to do that. The naive way is just trial and error. You group users, for example, users that never used a specific feature versus users that did use. We have some cool case studies from HP, for example, that the product manager there thought that a specific feature is really delightful. And without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And the way for that person to prove this was to do segmentation for customers that use that feature versus never use that feature, iOS and Android. And he really proved that people that are using that specific feature are happier than other people. Another really useful tool to do that is segmented NPS. So most of you know about NPS, Net Promoter Score. You get a score for your brand. It's sourced by asking customers how likely they are to recommend your product to a friend or a colleague. And you're probably, the other end of segmented NPS with many of your products. Segmented NPS takes that data and layers it on the raw data. And this enables you to start asking really complicated questions without reaching out to the customers again with that single question. So people with iOS 15, are they happier with the product than people with iOS 14? People that used the product 3 times a week on average versus people that never used it. One of the things that we do is we run an insights engine, which is an automatic engine that pops up those audiences. The engine actually looks for those characteristics for happy customers, non-happy customers, people that failed the setup versus people that never failed the setup, and tries to find the common characteristics for those people to create those automatic audiences. So there's a lot behind this. If I had to do one thing, I would do segmented NPS. This is where I would start. Again, layering Net Promoter Score on top of raw data. That's a really good place to start before you get into kind of more interesting and complex algorithms.
Got it. We have one more question that came in. Can you describe how you tag experiences in the app to understand where customers may be having issues?
I'm not sure if it's for us or for Atomic Robot.
It doesn't say who is it for, so I'm going to leave it open for everyone to grab.
Yeah, I can say a word about this. So ideally, you want to have every screen and every button press in the app sent to analytics. So whatever analytics you're using, Firebase or Mixpanel or if you send all your events to Segment, if you have your own analytics solutions, you want to send every button press, every screen. And then what you need to do, you need to have a good data warehouse that enables you to analyze which users did what, how many times. So for example, if I have an air conditioner, you want a way to analyze what group of users, what segment of users clicked on a specific button at least 3 times the last month. But the baseline is you don't know in advance what you're going to need as you're analyzing the data or interacting. So ideally, you want to send whatever information you can from the app, but not less important, from the physical device. Going back to the spectrum, you might have a device that can and is used directly, button clicks on the device. You want that information to be sent to the data warehouse server, Copilot CX, whatever system you're using, in order to be able to analyze really what the household is doing, not just what a user is doing with the app or with a specific interface.
Got it. Makes sense. Atomic Robot, anything to add on that one?
From a designer's perspective, when we receive that analytics from user research, one thing that I like to do is to map it out visually. So that way, oftentimes we will have sitemaps or other information architecture models. It really helps me visually to identify, like, this is where they're having trouble in the flow. So we may have multiple user journeys mapped out visually. And oftentimes with the user's emotions going along with the entire flow or the entire process for a specific solution. So when we see that they're having experience issues at certain points, we're able to then just like put a sticker there, like a visual, just some sort of visual, so we know these are the areas that we need to address. And then as we address them, we're able to remove those points and reprioritize them that way. So for the design team, that's something that I like to do.
And I have one last comment about this. You need to remember that experiences are multidimensional. So it's not just where in the app that customer had a bad experience. It's what other parameters characterize that customer: geography, localization, type of phone they're using. We had a big issue with one of our customers that their users with iOS 14.3 couldn't sign up, couldn't log in and connect their product because of a change that Apple did when they launched iOS 14.3. So you need to look at all of those dimensions, not just the point in the app, the screen that they're failing, but also are there other dimensions that characterize those people that fail setting up or fail using a feature.
Got it. Okay, it seems like these are all the questions that we have for today, but if I'm kind of gathering the common theme from what the team at Atomic Robot said and Tziki said, the real thing that plays well for brand is that they gather the data. They analyze the data. They're doing it in a very proactive way, rather than waiting for it to surface up in the form of returns or negative reviews. And at the end of the day, the data is there. You just need to have the desire and the ability to extract it and take action upon it. So I'd like to take a moment to thank all of the attendees who came into the webinar. We really appreciate your time. So thank you for attending today. To the amazing team at Atomic Robot, always a pleasure to work with you. I would like to ask everyone to follow both Atomic Robot and Copilot CX on our LinkedIn page. We are going to share a video clip of the webinar and a link to the full recording on our social media channels. So please visit our LinkedIn pages, follow us as we share more insights on our social posts, on our social feeds. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.